I think sometimes if a coach or a parent or an athlete isn't necessarily familiar with how I practice or just like the goals of performance nutrition in general, they can kind of expect a dietitian with literally the word diet in
Right.
in the name to kind of open up a conversation about eat this, not that, or provide a certain meal plan to follow. And that's not what I do at all. Instead, my goals as a sports dietitian are to improve performance, enhance recovery, and reduce the risk of injury or illness, both physically and mentally, with food as the superpower.
But like as a parent, this is something that I'm trying to be aware of for the future of like how do I set my kid up for success throughout the day, not just in their sport, but like in the classroom as well.
So went on to college outside of my parents' house and was up to making my own decisions about what I was going to eat, when I was going to eat it, what I was going to drink, when I was going to drink it, whatever that may be. And I struggled a lot. I was kind of looking around, trying to get ideas from what everyone else was doing. That got me into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And so I knew when becoming a dietitian, I knew that sports was the direction that I wanted to go, because I wanted to be able to help developing athletes avoid making the same mistakes that I made. There's so much diet culture in our world, and but now, as I am working professionally, we face that every single day, and finding fun with food is something that I am really passionate about.
That was Ellen Davis, and you're listening to the Forging Iron podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Jaworski, and in today's episode, we dive deep into the role that nutrition plays in helping us set ourselves up for success in sport and in life, as well as how to redefine that relationship that we have with food when life gets a little bit messy. Ellen is a certified specialist in sports dietitian. She's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to fitness and nutrition. She's done so much great work with active adults and youth athletes. I'm really honored and proud to bring you guys this episode. I think whether you're a first-time marathoner or a 15-time Ironman, you're gonna get something out of this. But before we get into the actual episode, today's podcast is brought to you by the Forging Iron Training Squad. Look, training for endurance sports can be really, really complicated. So that's why I created the Forging Iron Training Squad. It's an online membership that helps you guide and navigate your way through your training, as well as make it a little bit more flexible so that you can fit it and adjust it into your own life. It has programs that include yoga flows, core strength, running form fixes, and more, so that you can show up to the starting line of your next race confident, strong, and fitter than ever. As a special thanks to listening to this podcast, you'll get 50% off your first month by using the code PODCAST at checkout. Do ironworks-endurance.mykajabi.com to find out more, and use the code PODCAST at checkout for 50% off your first month. Now back to the show.
All right, Ellen, so great to have you into the podcast today. So we're going to dive right in. Before we talk about all of your sports nutrition, sports dietitian stuff that you have going now, I always think it's really fascinating to see kind of where people came from, what their origin story was. So what was youth sports like growing up? Because you weren't always a dietitian, obviously. So like what kind of was the impetus to get you started on that path down later in life?
Yeah, that's a good question, and super important to my story as a dietitian. It really is a good build up, in my opinion. But so youth sports were unique. I went to an incredibly small high school in Northeast Iowa. I graduated with 52 in my class, and so it wasn't like we had the plethora of youth sports that we have available now today. But youth sports included T-ball, softball, coach pitch, fast pitch. Like that was it. That was the extent of our youth sports experience, and which worked out really well for me because I absolutely loved softball. That was my first true passion. But then once we got into the middle school, the middle school years, I was able to start running. Had an opportunity to do middle school track, not cross country, but track in the spring, and found some success like early on. I don't know that I was really that fast, but I was really competitive. And so that was really an advantage for me. And then in high school, you know, I knew that I was going to go out for cross country. My older sister had run cross country, and I spent many years running around, you know, after her on the cross country courses and stuff. And so kind of had a little bit of a surprisingly good freshman year. I think some, including myself, thought maybe it was a total fluke, but again, I really did not like to lose, and so I was just super competitive and had a lot of fun throughout high school, cross country and track. I also played softball through high school. I dipped my toe onto the basketball court, but was really more of a defensive player. Didn't really have the whole offensive game. I played exactly, you know, like 45 seconds in a varsity game. Got a steal, got a layup, and I hung up my shoes, and it was all good. But you know, really realized probably my probably sophomore or junior year that running would be in my future. And so I had a really cool opportunity to go on to the University of Missouri to run track and cross country there. And that's where my sports dietitian track kind of really came to be, because you know, throughout high school, I don't know, I didn't really give nutrition a whole lot of thought. You know, I think I finally started packing my own lunch like maybe my senior year of high school, only on meat day, just for the sake of, well, I suppose it's probably something that I should do. My mom was a great cook, still is to this day, and just always had amazing meals available for me when I walked in the door after cross country practice and things. But you know, just didn't give it a whole lot of thought, right? So went on to college outside of my parents' house and was up to making my own decisions about what I was going to eat, when I was going to eat it, what I was going to drink, when I was going to drink it, you know, whatever that may be. And I struggled a lot. I was kind of looking around, you know, trying to get ideas from what everyone else was doing, because I'll be honest, I was a little fish in a very big pond, and I was intimidated. I didn't know what I was doing. And so that got me into a lot of trouble looking around, trying to figure out, you know, how do I do this? And I ended up, you know, with my first injury 4 weeks into my freshman year of college. I rolled my ankle really bad on a long run, Saturday morning long run. And we were a pretty slim crew as far as our cross country team, and I was needed to run at, you know, in a couple of weeks. We were racing at the big Notre Dame meet, I remember, and I needed to race, and so we pushed my recovery probably too fast, and I was not eating appropriately, fueling appropriately in order to support that kind of recovery. It was just kind of the beginning of a whole lot of things that happened. And so I ended up with 5 stress fractures over the course of my 5-year career at Mizzou. And, you know, many might hear that and think, oh, wow, you were, you know, maybe she had an eating disorder, or, you know, maybe she was, you know, severely underfueled. I think I would say I was underfueled but overnourished, if that makes sense. You know, I was choosing, I was not prioritizing recovery at the most appropriate times, and I was skipping meals early on in the day because, you know, just purely for making excuses for myself. I didn't have time. I didn't, you know, have the easy access to the dining hall or whatever. And then once I moved out of the dorms, I was on my own in my apartment, whatever. I was making excuses. And so anyway, just ended up kind of facing a lot of heartache as far as performance was concerned, because I was cross training all the time and I was not able to compete. And when I was able to compete, I wasn't racing as fast as I wanted to. It was just super frustrating. And so about 3 years into my my career, you know, I finally started to put it together, you know, like, okay, this is nutritionally related. And very conveniently, I was having to figure out what I was going to do with my life after running, and tripped upon the dietetic program at Mizzou. And so I knew when becoming a dietitian, I knew that sports was the direction that I wanted to go, because I wanted to be able to help developing athletes avoid making the same mistakes that I made, kind of look for those unexpected blind spots, kind of help them through that transition, and really, find fun with food. There's so much diet culture in our world, and but now, as I am working professionally, we face that every single day, and finding fun with food is something that I am really passionate about. And so kind of weaving that confidence into both developing athletes and seasoned athletes, because even us as parents and endurance athletes and people who like to move their body for fun or not for fun sometimes, we still face those messages that it can be tough to figure out. So anyway, that's kind of my journey. It's been I've had really unique jobs and responsibilities, and just recently I've taken the full launch into full-time self-employment, and I love it. I love what I do. I love being able to do what I do with the people who I do it with, the families that I meet, the athletes that I work with. It just fills me up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So let's dive into that a little bit. So when I know a big thing that you do is work with high school teams, and that's something that we have in common. So what does that look like for you when you're reaching out to a coach or a team? What do those conversations go like? Because I would imagine that a lot of athletes kind of struggle with the same things. I mean, everyone's individual, but most of us are kind of looking for the basic answers. So what does that conversation look like when you first started up?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's probably evolved a lot over the last 13 years. I've been kind of I feel like I've been saying a lot over the last several months that like this launch into full-time self-employment has really been like a 13-year build, right? And so because when I started out as a dietitian, like I had no tout as a sports dietitian. I had just run, college track and cross country, but that didn't make me a great like performance-oriented dietitian. And so there's been some conversations that I've probably botched in my career. But now in speaking with coaches and athletes, like I always come with like full transparency all the time, because I think, kind of circling back to that whole diet culture thing that we were talking about very briefly earlier, I think sometimes if a coach or a parent or an athlete isn't necessarily familiar with how I practice or just like the goals of performance nutrition in general, they can kind of expect a dietitian with literally the word diet in the name to kind of open up a conversation about eat this, not that, or provide a certain meal plan to follow. And that's not what I do at all. Instead, my goals as a sports dietitian are to improve performance, enhance recovery, and reduce the risk of injury or illness, both physically and mentally, with food as the superpower, right? And so that's where my conversations start. Has performance been uncharacteristically poor, or have you been experiencing a long-term plateau and the training doesn't really align with the performance? Like, okay, what's going on there? Are you chronically sore or injured, or are you getting sick a lot, and are you having a hard time recovering from that sickness? I find out what the problem is, and then we put together a plan to fix it, right? And so with a student athlete or parent, those are the exact conversations we're having. Kind of like how do you see food helping in this situation, right? And then with coaches, I try to gain a good perspective on the biggest challenges that that the team is facing, right? Are you noticing poor performance 2/3 of the way through the season? Are you coaching female athletes and you have heard rumblings of, lack of menstruation or, chronic bone stress or recurring bone stress? Like what are those things? What are those underlying challenges that you're facing? And then we start to dig into that, figure out, okay, what's the culture like on your team? Does food have a place at the table, so to speak? Like, is this a positive thing or is this something that we're afraid of? And if it's something that we're afraid of, let's find some ways to make that more enjoyable, more celebrated, more open, more talked about, right? Because I don't know, it's a funny thing. And I'm sure you can probably relate to this as a
Yes.
high school coach too. It's like, sometimes it just takes like talking about it. And then it's like, okay, well, this isn't so scary. Like, this is okay, you know? So
it's crazy. And especially just like the relationship that we have with food, and the relationship that we have with those conversations too, because like as a male coach of high school female athletes, like there's a lot of treading water of what I should or shouldn't say with some of that. And so I always kind of circle back to some of that stuff that you said, or like, what are those conversations about food, and how do we make it fun? It's not just that we want to like perform our best, but we want to feel good doing it. You know,
Yep.
we want to have energy throughout the day to make it through our classes and stuff like that. So when you're talking to a high school athlete, and as a parent, this is something that my son's 1, so he's not like, performance oriented yet, or any of that stuff. But like as a parent, this is something that I'm trying to be aware of for the future of like, how do I set my kid up for success throughout the day, not just in their sport, but like in the classroom as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love this question because, you and I share, that characteristic as parents. I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old as well, and so these are questions that I'm asking myself on a regular basis too. And I honestly will catch myself, kind of saying some things that I wouldn't say to my athletes to my kids. And I was like, and I really have to stop myself, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not right, like, walk the walk, walk your talk, I guess is what I probably should say. But anyway, I think from a parenting standpoint, and if we're speaking specifically to like the toddler age, like preschool age, we talk a lot about food helping us feel good at home. And, and we know that young kids are finicky creatures, like sometimes they could eat the house down, and other times they won't touch food with a 10-foot pole. And you then notice the behavior differences between those two situations. And you're like, if you would just eat something, like we would be all so much happier.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I have found that, giving a couple of options to my young kiddos, has been helpful. Help let them get involved in the preparation or the choosing of what it is that they're going to have for breakfast. Let's say breakfast is a non-negotiable at our house. Like they have to eat something before they head out and head to preschool or daycare, whatever situation it is. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's more than others. Some days that's more volume than others, but we talk about how breakfast can help us pay attention better, use our listening ears a little bit more effectively. I try to make it, and this is going to be tough for your 1-year-old, but for my 4-year-old, I try to make it applicable to whatever it is that they're learning at school. So like this week, for example, my son came home with the class stuffed animal. His name is Wag. Right. Nice. And so the goal of the week is that WAG goes on experiences with the preschooler. Right. And so then we're supposed to journal about what WAG did with the family. And so we're talking about, I'm asking, Milo, what do you think WAG wants for breakfast? And, so then WAG wants, a smoothie. And so, all right, cool, let's make a smoothie. And Milo loves helping me make smoothies. And so that's just a really cool thing for him. And then we talk about, okay, so how does your tummy feel? What's your tummy feeling you? What's your tummy telling you after breakfast? Does it have a little bit room for more, or is it totally satisfied? And usually, oh, it's good, even when I know that it's probably not good. Yeah. And so then I'll make a recommendation. I'll be like, hey, do you want to take a bar on the way to school just in case? Yeah, I think that'd probably be good. And then we can kind of like put in those good nutrients on the way out the door. and then from there at school, things get a little bit variable, and I'm not going to be that mom who's like, yeah, well, I'm definitely not that mom who's sending lunch with the preschooler every day. Although he would prefer that, but that's just not what we're gonna probably do.
Yeah.
But making as nourished of choices as possible.
Yeah.
And then at dinner time is really the next opportunity that we have to sit down and eat together. Again, I'll give a couple of options, and it's maybe not the most, my kids like toddler foods, it's mac and cheese, it's chicken nuggets, it's hot dogs, it's all the things. But then we find some balance with that. I know that my kiddos love green beans, so we always have green beans available as an option. And we just try to keep it fun, and again, they love quesadillas. So Milo will, like, his favorite thing.
Who doesn't love quesadillas?
I know, exactly.
I mean, they're so good.
They are so good. And so easy, so quick. I mean, that's like a 60-second, dinner option. But he loves to spread the cheese around, and then I'll ask him if he wants to add in anything else to his quesadilla, and then, let it be. So really letting them get involved. And one thing that I would recommend as your son gets older, and something that we all struggle with, but kind of trying to keep like the good foods and bad foods like out of the conversation. Like there's no good and bad. Food is food. Some foods might make our tummies feel better. Some food may not. For example, we decorated gingerbread men this weekend, right? And of course, like all the crummiest candy pieces that you could probably imagine. Just not high quality candy is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so, Milo and Remy both like just hit it hard, right? Like we had not very much candy left to put on our gingerbread men because it was all ingested into their stomachs. And I was like, all right, guys, just tell me how you feel in, a few minutes or, in 30 minutes or whatever. And they both felt not very good. And so we just talked about that. We're like, okay, so remember when mom was talking about, that's probably not going to make your tummy feel all that great. Well, now here we are, right? And so I don't know, it's just kind of like really relating it to what's important to them. One more thing. Sorry, we could probably talk forever about kids, but one more thing that's probably my favorite. Especially when Milo, the oldest one, gets a cut, like right now, for example, he was playing with the tape measure, and like the tape measure sliced his finger after we told him several times, like, hey, that thing is going to slice your finger if you keep doing that. Yeah. Anyway, so it's pretty deep, right? And it was pretty traumatic. I'm sure it hurt. I've done that before. It does not feel good. But we talk about, well, actually, I didn't even have to bring it up this time. Milo started saying to me, oh man, Mom, I'm going to have to eat lots of green beans to help fix that cut. I'm like, yeah, here we go. All right, we'll have green beans tonight for dinner, like those types of things. Cause we've talked about before, like, when you get an owie, our fruits and our vegetables, good protein, and we talk about like, oh, cheese stick is a great source of protein, Milo, like that's going to be really helpful for that cut on your finger.
Yeah.
So those are just a few tips that I have as a parent to parent, utilizing nutrition and balanced intake to kind of be on your side.
Yeah. Well, and building in that, like, that skill of understanding that what you put in your body makes a difference. I mean, I think we all know that on some level, but like it takes a little bit of like looking in the mirror and understanding like, hey, what I'm doing now is setting up what I'm doing in the next 30 minutes, 2 hours, rest of the day. And then kind of bringing that back to like not only just toddlers and helping them build that skill for the rest of their life, but like so many people are just going through life and they have no idea, and they've been kind of stuck in those same food patterns for so long that they just like, they don't really know, or they eat, and I do this all the time too, but like they eat while they're watching TV, or they eat while they're watching something else, or like it's kind of mindless. And so you don't build that relationship with the food that you're eating of like, hey, what am I eating and how is it going to make me feel later? And then once you get into the athletic stage of like, did I feel good in the workout today? And at the high school level, it's probably one of the conversations that we have. And then certainly with the triathletes and runners that I coach, it's a conversation that we have of like, what you're eating sets up your workout. If your workout didn't go well, that's not because you don't have the fitness to do the workout. Oftentimes it's like you didn't fuel properly, and that can mean a whole variety of things, right? There's so many different things. There's hydration. There's did you have enough protein, carbs, fat, whatever it is. And so building that skill from a young age, but then like that's something that everyone can work on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That mindfulness, is something that we can always cultivate. And like you said, like just becoming in tune with how whatever it is that you're doing makes you feel, right? And then fortunately, especially like when you're working with like that younger population, and this is cliche, but they are so spongy, they will just like soak anything up. And fortunately, if you can show them a couple of like positive experiences with like good timing of fuel and good composition of fuel, and they note like the benefits of that, it doesn't take very long for them to kind of start adopting that and putting it into place. But yeah, it's truly just like experiencing that pause and recognizing, okay, how did that actually make me feel, and what did it do for my future performances, whether that is like an athletic performance, or how did I feel going into that work meeting, or how was my brain functioning, in that super important conversation that I was having this afternoon, or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah. I think too, and I'm going to circle back to like kind of my high school and college experience, but I think I love your approach because it's really pretty simple. And you like to make it very, realistic for where that person's at in life, and you try not to overcomplicate it. And that's something that I do because I just love to overcomplicate things. I try to make, like, someone talks to me about training and all of a sudden I'm talking about how much lactate they have in their blood and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, what? I thought we were just talking about like going for a run, and so, but like, it's something that I care about because I struggled with it. Like high school, my mom is a type 1 diabetic. So high school, I was actually like really aware of what I was putting in my body because we had all these lists of high glycemic and low glycemic foods. And, for her, that was like, she wants to have stable energy, so she's got to eat that. And I was like, well, that makes sense to me. So I kind of paid attention to that kind of stuff in high school. Mm-hmm. And then when I got to college, like you, I'm a competitive person. But we had the dining hall, and I was competitive in running, but I was also competitive in everything I did. And so, like, me and my teammates would go to the dining hall after practice, and it was like, okay, we ate our food, but then, like, how many cookies can you eat? And so then all of a sudden I'm eating like 15 cookies at dinner, and I wasn't running that much more than I was in high school, even though like I thought I was a really cool college athlete. And so all of a sudden, like, people started calling me Cookie Belly, and I have like this little pouch right here, and it's like the precedent of a beer belly. And I was like, okay, this isn't good. And so we had a dietitian, someone on the staff at Auburn, and they were like, let's get you in for a bod pod and see kind of what's going on. And bod pods, for people that don't know, are these like little egg things that you like sit in, and they measure the displacement of like mass and space. And I don't know, that's a little over my head, but basically it told me that I was like 10 or 11% body fat, which is like, it's not bad. It's not great for a college athlete, but it's not bad. But then like it compared me to like the Kenyans and Ethiopians that are like 3 and 4%. And I was like, well, I'm trying to be as fast as them. So like something needs to change. And then I went down like just way too many rabbit holes where you're looking around being like, if you look at what everyone else is doing, just because they're able to do it doesn't mean that's the reason that they're successful. Mm-hmm. So that was like really challenging, trying to figure out, okay, how you lose fat but then maintain running at like a high level. So let's talk about that,
Yeah.
because I don't necessarily think I had an eating disorder, and I certainly wasn't diagnosed with one, but like it was disordered eating is how I would, like, it wasn't a good system.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that. So, okay. So first of all, this is so funny. We've never talked about this, but like you and I had very similar experiences. I was on the other end of that, where the cookies were involved in my situation for sure. I was running an extraordinary amount more than I did in high school. We were at a really low mileage program in high school, but I was trying to make up for, lost time, I guess, with the cookies, and they were really good. Anyway, so that's just really funny. We've never talked about that before, but lots of similarities, and we'll probably have to talk more later. But so tell me about that that bod pod experience for you. Did he or she kind of go over like your results with you, like, and kind of explain like what that meant at all, or was it just like, here's your information, see ya?
Oh man, this is like, I'm now old. This was over
know.
10 years ago, and so it's like I don't exactly remember. But I was also like, at that point, I felt like maybe I knew enough to be like dangerous, to where I wasn't necessarily going to listen to whatever he said, and I just like, I was a little bit shocked. I kind of went in thinking like, hey, this is gonna tell me that I'm like really in shape, and then it didn't, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I don't remember what that conversation was like, and I probably was just like flabbergasted at the fact that it was like a higher number than I anticipated. Like I thought maybe 5 or 6 or 7, and it was like 11, and I was like, okay, that's like 2 to 3 times more than like the Ethiopians. Not that like the Ethiopians or Kenyans are like necessarily the beacons of health.
Sure.
And that's something that I'm really trying to like work with my triathletes on, is like prioritizing health over performance, especially because like if you focus on performance, you can certainly sacrifice health for a short-term performance benefit, but in the long term, both of those things suffer. And if you focus on health, then in the long term, both of those things get better.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I don't exactly remember what that conversation was like.
Yeah. Well, because you can't race well if you can't race.
Yes.
Right. Like that is something that's super important to me. So I love that you are taking that approach, focusing on health as opposed to performance. By way of health, you can get to the optimal performances. But you're right. If you go the other way, it doesn't work all the time. So anyway, the reason I ask you that question is because there's been a lot of conversation lately in the world of sports dietitians, especially on college campuses, like the purpose and intent of the use of body composition, and how we can and should probably improve that process. Because you and I alike, again, I had the same situation. We used a DEXA scan. I was brought in for a body composition, was given my result, was way higher than it probably should have been. But no one gave me any direction. And so I, just like you, was like, oh, well, I got to change something, and definitely sent me into like some form of disorder. I won't say an eating disorder, but some form of disorder. Anyway, at that time, we didn't have a whole lot of support, so I was left to do it on my own, which again is why I became a sports dietitian, because I wanted to be able to help bridge that gap. So, and I don't know what the right answer is, honestly. I think body composition has its place, within performance, of course. I think there's a lot of benefit that you can pull out from that process, but it is a dance. It's a delicate dance, right? Because it has to be approached appropriately. Otherwise, you have situations like you and I, and that athlete just kind of goes off and does their own thing, and then may end up hurt or sick or worse because of it. So, anyway, okay, so you got your information, which, by the way, we should probably note, like 11% probably wouldn't be terrible for many athletes,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Like,
right now, if I went and did that again, I'd be like, oh, all right. That's fine. I'm good to go, you know?
Yeah, and like that 3 to 5%, which I know a lot of athletes are striving for, that does sacrifice your health, and that is striving for purely performance, and that ends up hurt or sick way more often. So anyway, also just specifically like for males, 11% or lower might be appropriate. For females, that would be nowhere close.
Right,
We're wanting at least, I won't even say more than that. And it's going to be very dependent upon the individual in order to elicit that menstrual cycle, maintain that menstrual cycle, keep estrogen at an appropriate level, that bone density is maintained and you're not getting hurt. So anyway, just a little side note there.
Yeah.
But so tell me then, so what'd you do next?
Oh man. The first thing I did, I believe, was like download My Fitness Pal, which is to this day, like, I don't believe in counting calories, and I believe you're kind of the same way, but to be honest, I wouldn't even really care if you were like, no, counting calories is like the best way. You have to go do that.
I'm not, by the way.
Yeah. But that's what I did. And I was like, okay, I'm burning this much. I know from my runs, and my Garmin tells me this, which is more or less inaccurate.
Shoddy at best.
Yeah. And so like I just tried to maintain that, and I tried to do it somewhat healthily. But then I'd say because of that, like, because that was my focus, and my focus was on the losing. Well, at that point, I just kind of thought losing weight. Because that was my focus, then like it wasn't on the performance, and I wasn't asking myself those questions of like, hey, is this making me perform better? I thought, hey, this is making me perform better because I have less weight to carry around, which is just so false. But I just started tracking it, and I just developed some really bad habits because of it, that took a long time to figure out, and go away. And like I had to go through a lot of injuries and a whole lot of fatigue to do that. But eventually I found some, I don't even know if they're good books, but I found some books that kind of pulled me out of that, and listened to a couple of different like health and nutrition podcasts. And I wouldn't even say like I would recommend those systems now, but they were enough to be like, hey, like one of them was the Bulletproof Diet, which is like basically super low carb and eat a bunch of like butter and fat, and like that's the way to a healthy life. And for whatever reason, I was like fascinated by that, and so I tried it. And I've now graduated from Auburn. I had a fifth year that I did at Drake because I was injured so much at Auburn that I got to have a fifth year. And I wouldn't go do that again. But like, I think part of what I did at Auburn in those first couple years was like, I basically cut out fat, and I basically cut out protein, and I just like ran on carbs, which is like, carbs are king and they help you perform better, but you definitely need those other two things to like regulate hormonal balance, and actually recover.
Yep.
And so my energy levels would just be like way up, way down. And again, I got injured and sick a lot because of it. And then I tried this more like higher fat, higher protein, basically diet. And when I was at Drake, because again, when I was left Auburn, I had a knee injury. And a lot of my injuries like were just overuse injuries that could have easily been prevented from just like training a little bit less and eating a little bit more. But I got to Drake. I was still injured, but I was eating a lot better. And so all of a sudden, like, all I can do is bike because my knee hurts so bad for that entire summer. And partway into that season, I run Griac. It's like one of my worst races ever. But then like 3 weeks later, I run a huge PR, eating more, running less, and weighing about 10 to 15 pounds more than I did when I was at Auburn. And I was like, hey, this is nice.
This is good.
Yeah.
I can get down with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then that kind of like helped me figure out a better path, and I'd still, wouldn't. I certainly don't have all the answers, but yeah, I think that's a big thing, and that's kind of stuck with me since then. It's not necessarily that diet worked, but having enough energy and stable energy to get through the workouts and the week and everything that you need to do is just super important. I mean, you can't perform long term if you're not consistent. That consistency piece isn't there unless you have enough energy to support it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's so interesting because, you've shared your story. It's funny how many parallels there are to my story, but at the end of the day, it's finding what works for you. Because like you said, that you don't have all the answers. I don't either, and this is my profession, but there are so many different ways to slice a pie, no pun intended, but, it truly is finding what works well for you. And the success really lies within cultivating that personal attunement to what is working, right? And what allows for an adequate amount of energy to go do the things that you like to do, right? You and I, we're likely both experiencing what is now known as relative energy deficiency in sport, or REDS. And I'm sure you've heard of this. It's kind of the female athlete triad's older cousin, I'll say.
Okay.
Probably more distinguished cousin. But relative energy deficiency in sport is kind of this complex metabolic injury that I think it's expected that like over 60% of active individuals, humans, not even athletes, just active humans, are experiencing. It affects both males and females, and it is kind of plagued with things, such as injuries, depression, or mental instability, low energy, low ferritin, bone stress, lack of menstrual cycle in females, low testosterone in males, poor recovery, poor endurance capacity, poor glycogen storage, right? So there's like all of these different complexities of this syndrome, essentially. And it's exactly what you're describing. You didn't have the energy to do what you wanted to do on a day-to-day basis. Some days were maybe really good. Some days were pretty poor. It's all related to that inability for your body to complete the bodily processes that are required in order to be a student athlete.
Yeah. Well, and so much of like diet culture and endurance culture, and I think we're starting to see a good shift in that. But so much of it, at least at the time, was like, oh, I'm exhausted. Good. Like that's how you get better, is you just push yourself until you like physically almost break, and then hopefully you don't.
Right. If like you're in like the 1 or 2% that doesn't break, can hold it together through that whatever performance it is, then that was a success. But never mind the 6 months of misery leading up to it. It's that grind culture that I am not here for. Like
I exited that. I mean, and you could even say that like, did you really exit it? Like, you train for Ironmans all the time. You're putting in like 15 to 20 hours of training a week. But it's different. Like, the mindset is different. The relationship that I have with food is way different. And like I don't know if there's a healthy way to do an Ironman. Like, they're pretty extreme. But there's a healthy way to do a lot of training.
Yeah.
As long as you are paying attention to the right things.
Yep. Absolutely. And I'd love to hear you say that, because I think with like the anti-diet culture, I think that message specifically is easily lost. And I think it's not as profound like in the sports world, but there are like a lot of anti-diet sports dietitians, and I would consider myself essentially one of them. But I will support my student athlete or adult athlete, active individual, my food friends, just all encompassing in whatever pursuit it is that they are striving for, right? But just like you said, let's find a healthy balance with that. Let's find a healthy relationship with your feelings towards that movement, that workout, that training, whatever you're calling it. Let's find a healthy relationship with the food that you're putting into your body in order to support that. Let's find a healthy relationship with the relationships that you have in your life, you know, because, there's no race that's worth, you know, severing ties with all of those things. And so, I love that. I love to hear you say that. And, now, how can we get others to adopt that way of being too?
I don't know. They could hire us.
Yeah,
Shameless
there you
plug.
go.
Shameless plug. All right, you brought up the metabolic thing. Oh man, see if I can get this. All right, so I have this, and then we're gonna go with a couple final questions. But I just wanted to briefly mention this because it's cool, and I'm a geek and I like it. But this is like it's a gas mask, so basically like you could test VO2 or whatever with this.
Yeah.
And you like strap it on your back, and it's got all these like cords, and you end up looking like Bane from Batman.
Very cool.
But you like what I like to use it for myself and for my athletes is like Ironman is such a game of like metabolic efficiency and how like you can actually see like how much fat versus carb you're burning at different intensities. And you can like see do you have like mitochondrial metabolic efficiency or do you not? And I know that's probably more like the sciencey like very triathlon specific sport side of things. But how do you see like when you're dealing with an athlete that like really wants to do kind of long-term performance and kind of needs more of that metabolic side of things, like what are some of those conversations that you might have with them?
So the first, really the most important thing to me starting out is getting a good understanding of what their starting point is. You know, what are those habits and trends? What does that currently look like as far as meals, snacks, pre-training fuel, recovery fuel, you know, depending on the type of athlete that I'm working with, whether that's a high school athlete or an active adult. That's going to vary widely, right? So for my high school athletes, we're really digging into, you know, what is your class schedule like? What time do you have to be at school? What are you eating for breakfast? What time is school lunch? Are you bringing your own? Are you supplementing school lunch? You know, are you incorporating some sort of fuel before your afternoon training? You know, those types of things. What additional extracurricular activities do you have? Are you going from one thing to another and not getting home until 7 or 8 p.m.? You know, those are the types of things that I'm really digging into, trying to figure out where they're currently at, right? Because you can kind of surmise some of that information as far as like what they're likely using as energy based on what their body is being provided with,
right?
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so with that type of athlete, that's where I would start. That's where the conversation would start. With an active adult, kind of the same thing. You know, are you traveling for work? You know, what does family life look like? Are you, you know, running kids from here to there, you know, every night of the week? You know, what does that intentionality look like around meals and snacks, right? And so I can kind of, again, gather some pretty decent information from there. With my active adults, I can usually get some good information about recovery, like how many workouts are you able to do a week? How many do you want to do? You know, are you experiencing just extreme fatigue following a bigger workout? Because if that is the case, I would guess, especially if they are doing higher intensity stuff, there's not enough glycogen in the tank. And so then we're probably utilizing more carbohydrate as an energy source as opposed to fat. And so we work on figuring that out. It's a fine balance.
Right,
we got to find just enough to keep them feeling good, you know, improve that recovery post-workout. But depending on their goals, again, whatever that may be, then we end up having to manipulate that just a little bit.
Right. No one-size-fits-all strategy.
Yeah, exactly. I think most often, probably the conversation that I'm having the most often is just improved consistency. And placing some intention around fueling as a concept, right? And that, again, is a delicate conversation because there is a distinct difference between disciplined and destructive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And extreme discipline can quickly become destructive, where, you know, some of those more disordered thoughts and behaviors can kind of come into play. And so that's why in my conversations, you know, initially and throughout my journey and relationship with a student athlete or an active adult is promoting the why with the what. You know, like, why is it that we are doing this specific fueling strategy here, and what is it going to do for us, right? As opposed to, you know, just do this because I said so. Because do this because I said so can really lead to destruction pretty quickly, because it's like, oh, well, if a little bit of this works, then a lot of this is going to be even better. And that's when the restriction typically comes in. And that's when the underfueled injuries, illnesses can usually present. So I don't know if that was really an answer to your question or not.
Yeah,
but
no, yeah, it was. And what you had a sentence in there that was like, if I just replace the word fueling with training, it's the same. You know, like the same thought process of like, okay, we're just trying to build consistency, and like we go from one extreme to another, of like inactive to like, okay, I'm doing a marathon, or okay, I'm doing a Ironman. It's like those are two pretty extreme things. Like let's just have a baseline all the time. And then eventually, you know, you can go do an Ironman or you can go do a marathon, but like, let's improve your consistency. What can you do every week and repeat it every week so that you just like have that baseline? And it's the same thing with nutrition of like, what are those basic habits that you can just repeat all the time so that you always feel pretty good? Because it doesn't have to taste bad. It doesn't have to feel bad from a workout standpoint. Like, you can be a really healthy, fit person without having to like punish yourself.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Mic drop.
All right. Well, we're getting close to needing to head out. But I have a couple rapid fire questions. If you had to pick a fast food or faster food restaurant to eat at, what would you pick, or which one would you pick, and what would you get?
So easy. Culver's Butterburger with cheese.
Oh, wow.
Every single time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was expecting like mine would be Chipotle.
Yeah.
And that's like, I try to make it kind of healthy.
Also a good choice. I love Chipotle, but I think probably I think Culver's probably just has like a special, like, I don't know, meaning to me, because through the pandemic, okay, so our youngest was born March 13th of 2020, like the beginning of the end is what I say.
Yeah.
And then we had not even a 2-year-old at home at the same time. And so we were like kind of at wit's end, like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Like, what is going on? So anyway, we started, you know, of course, like everyone else. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if everyone else was doing this too, because I feel like I was living in this like alternative universe because I had a newborn and like my hormones were like way out of whack. Anyway, we'd go on drives and we found ourselves in the Culver's drive-through, and it was just something fun to do. And our oldest, obviously the baby couldn't eat anything, but the oldest found a love for Culver's corn dogs. And so, and for anyone with toddlers, again, preschoolers, the Culver's kids meal is a rockin' good deal. You get whatever entree you want, a side, milk, and a custard cup.
Nice.
And if you don't want the custard cup now, you can save the little thing for later, and then that's just like a fun date night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like we're going to Culver's later. All right. What's a meal or recipe that you guys include pretty much every week?
Oh, that's a good question. We are huge fans of our air fryer. That has been a lifesaver for us as a family with young children, because time is of the essence and you can do really a lot with air fryers. Okay, so this is a shameless plug for Costco because we're big fans. Like, we do most of our shopping at Costco, which is kind of ridiculous. But Culver's on the mind. Costco has these great chicken tender bites.
Mm.
They're from the brand Just Bear. I don't get paid to say that, but maybe I should reach out to them. Just Bear chicken tenders, chicken tender bites, and it's like real chicken breast, breaded, lightly breaded. It tastes a lot like Chick-fil-A, like
Okay.
chicken bites. They're great in the air fryer. So we do that so my husband and I will do like some sort of like rice and chicken bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll do the chicken with rice and roasted vegetables in a bowl, and then the kids will do the chicken bites, their green beans,
Nice.
and whatever fruit that they want, whatever is handy. So it's not really a recipe, but it's an absolute staple that's a part of every single week at our house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Make it easy.
Yeah.
Ours is probably either chili or like putting chicken in a crock pot with just like salsa and then shredding it and putting it on like a make your own Chipotle bowl or something like that.
Yep.
But chicken nuggets are gradually making their way into like every facet of my life, and so that's a good tip.
Well, these chicken bites, they're just so versatile because like you can like cut them up and then put them on like a bagged salad kit, and then you've got your vegetables, you've got your protein. If you have a little bit of rice or something, then you've got your starch as well. So we actually just ran out last night, and I'm having a challenge at our house. We're gonna empty out like every single thing in our freezer before we buy anything else.
Nice. I like that.
I want a little refresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I need to do that too. Our freezer's always like full of stuff, but then we never have anything to eat. So, all right. Before we get to our last question, where can people find out more about you and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, good question. So I can be found currently at davissportsnutrition.com. I will share that's going to be going through a little bit of a rebranding. I've got some really exciting plans for the year 2023. I am super excited to be just about to announce that I am going to be transitioning to the Performance Collective. And that is going to be a group of professionals and individuals that are just in support of one another in what we do from a performance standpoint. And so it's something that I've already been doing for many years, collaborating with individuals like yourself and mental health performance coaches and all kinds of different individuals who are really passionate about helping people achieve their goals. And so it's just going to be a really cool concept that individuals, teams, and athletic departments can all benefit from. And so that's really exciting. But currently people can find me at davissportsnutrition.com or at davissportsnutrition@gmail.com is my email. But yeah, that's kind of what I got going on.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Second to last question. That you bringing up that team of people reminded me of one of the other things that I had written down. This is called the Forging Iron podcast. A big part of the name Ironworks and Forging Iron comes from as iron sharpens iron, people sharpen people. Part of why we're having this conversation and kind of the direction of this podcast is sharing those stories. Hopefully, people can take something out of them and make their lives better because of it. And so with that in mind, who would you recommend, realistic or not, would you want to hear from be on my podcast next?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. This one's catching me off guard a little bit. Well, I gotta say, Jesse Thomas is one of my favorite people in the whole world to listen to. Like and I think maybe there's a little because he and Lauren Fleshman have I don't know, a podcast. It's called Work Play Love, and then they've gone through like a transition with selling their business, Picky Bars, which I'm a big fan of too. But maybe it's like I don't know, absence makes the heart grow fonder or something,
Yeah,
like because
yeah.
they haven't done podcasts for a while because they've been super busy. But every time I go and listen to their podcast, like I just find myself just cracking up. Like I love his perspective because I think he seems like similar in nature to us. You know, he's been through that like super driven on the border of destructive kind of way of mind through his professional training career and things. But he's just a really down to earth, good dude. I had an opportunity to go meet him in Bend because I was doing a little bit of work with Picky Bars. He's just a really cool person.
Yeah.
So now he's of course retired from professional triathlon, but I think just hearing his perspective is, I don't know, I just really enjoy it.
Yeah. I always love his like Instagram posts of like about their son and being like super advanced because it's like the opposite of like trying to like so many parents. We could go down a rabbit hole. Of parents,
Exactly.
parents being really competitive with their kids and stuff like that. All right, last question. One of my favorite sayings is carpe diem. I have it tattooed on my arm, partly because my dad is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and so that's like a really big thing in our family is kind of making the most out of each day. Carpe diem is Greek, but the Greeks also have this other saying which is called memento mori, lesser known, a little bit more somber, but it means remember death. And so if we were to fast forward, hopefully 50 plus 60 years from now in the future, and you are approaching your last day on earth and you're surrounded by your friends and your family, and they're like, Ellen, how did you live such a good life? What can we do? What are the 3 things that you're going to tell them?
Ooh, all right. 3 things. So the first one is something that I am in consistent pursuit of, and that is progress over perfection. Because there have been times in my life that perfection has been the only way. If it's not perfect, it's not worth it. And as I've aged and wisdom hopefully has become a little bit more, abundant. I don't know if that would be the right way of saying it or not.
Sure, yeah.
But perfection is not attainable, and as long as we're making progress every single day, that there's so much joy in that. And so progress over perfection, from a sense of training, from a sense of food, from a sense of relationships. I kind of challenge myself with that as a parent every single day. Like I am no perfect parent, like not even close. But if I can learn with my kids and learn to be better with them and for them, I can feel good about it at the end of the day. The second one is comparison is the thief of all joy. Something else that I've been extremely plagued with, throughout my life, and I think kind of going back to that whole perfection thing, I think we all fall into this trap of comparison. Social media has got a hold on a lot of this country and world, I guess I should say. And we can easily start comparing ourselves to each other. And that's going to be the quickest way to lose all sense of joy. And so stop comparing yourself.
Yeah. It's so tough as an athlete, especially like a runner. It's like you can see on the track, like, am I as fast as this other person?
Yeah.
Or like, am I as fast as I was? Or am I as fast as this other person in history? Like, it's a really hard mindset to get out of.
It is. It absolutely is. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with it's not only comparison to someone else, but comparison to yourself, a former version of yourself, But I will stop. I will press pause and recognize, like, okay, that was me in a completely different environment. And I'm careful here not to make excuses for myself. It's not an excuse, but okay, current version of myself versus pre-kid version of myself
Yeah.
versus, you know, college version of myself when all I had to do was go to practice and go to class, and that was all that I was focused on, right? So like you have to take into account like the different variables that are fixed in your life, right? And then that kind of goes to finding joy in those variables, right? Like what can you appreciate about where you currently are and celebrate that. And then that kind of probably goes to my third point of to simply be where your feet are all the time. Be present, and kind of correlates to, you know, the comparison trap, but appreciate what it is that you have in front of you today, and find a way to make the most of that, I guess. So those are my 3 things.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Ellen, thanks for being a guest, and I'm sure we could have a whole nother hour-long conversation about more of the details of things. But if you want to find out more details, you can contact Ellen on get your nutrition sorted and get some better habits. So
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Thanks.